Good evening, everyone. It is July 23rd, 2019. I'm Kaleem Joy. I'm a licensed midwife and a certified pediatric massage therapist and a certified professional midwife. So I'm excited to join you all tonight. I'm looking forward to everybody that joins in. Some of you I get to see, some of you I don't. If you're watching this having been pre-taped, I hope you gain some amazing insight into our topic for tonight. Natural Childbirth 101 is our platform, and here comes everybody. And our topic for tonight is little babies and the NICU. Can we prevent it, and why does it happen, and what's the definition of it? Last week we talked about big babies and what was the definition of a big baby and how do we handle that. So tonight we're going to talk about little babies, because sometimes a family will have what's termed a preemie, an early baby, or a small baby for dates, or a baby who's not growing well, or perhaps a baby that they say, hey Jessica, that they'll talk about is what is IUGR, and we'll talk more about that as we get acquainted here and we get everybody on. Thank you everybody for joining me soon so that you could hear all the good stuff. All right, so let's ask the question, and I'd like you to chime in if you can. Why do you think little babies happen? And while you're thinking about that and sending me some of your answers, let's define what a little baby is. So a newborn who is 2,500 grams or less is what I would consider a little baby, which means a baby who's 5 pounds 5 ounces. According to the textbooks and online and the medical establishment, this is what's considered a baby who is small for dates, not thriving, definitely more on the preemie side, is that 5 pounds 5 ounces. So why do you think little babies happen? All right, chime in. Let's hear what you think here, okay? Because we're going to talk about that. While we're waiting for some of that to come along, I'll get you started, right? And genetics is definitely one possibility. Little babies sometimes are born to parents who are of small descent. All right, Jessica, I get a chance to watch tonight. Oh, I was a preemie. Oh, I totally forgot about that. 2 pounds 4 ounces. Yes, you would be considered a little baby and premature because you were 3 months early due to an incompetent cervix and had PDA, which means that she had a little valve in her heart that didn't close because she was early, and ligation 2 days after my birth, which she had heart surgery at being very, very early. So yes, okay, so we're going to come into those as to what is a little baby and how do they happen. All right, anybody else like to chime in while I'm going? So genetics are one possibility. Sometimes a little baby is born just fine from 37 weeks to 42 weeks, but happens to be small for dates. It's termed a small for dates baby. And that's a baby who is 5 pounds 5 ounces or less. And if this is the size baby that fits for this woman because she's of small stature, her genetics are small, we need to look at that as not a baby that's a concern, but a baby that's normal for her, right? All right. Some other things can be often the African American population often has babies that are of smaller size, depending on their situation. They may not always be under 5 pounds 5 ounces, but they could be in the 5 pound range. That's why there is also more prematurity in that particular population, which we hope to solve as time goes on, right? As we get more midwifery care available. So the other thing, nutrition 101. That's right, Jessica. So we know that nutrition, and in every live we talk about it, don't we? We talk about nutrition in some way or another. And why? Because nutrition is key. A major key to helping babies to, number one, go to term and 2, to grow well. So nutrition is important. Sometimes it can be that people eat a lot of food, but they have not good quality of food. Sometimes it's lack of food. Sometimes it's lack of money to afford certain foods. And that's where the education comes in, that you have to be able to eat within your budget the best quality of foods to help you and the baby do well as your baby to grow well. What else do we think attributes to a baby who is little? So in nutrition, sometimes it can be low calorie as well. So if someone feels apprehensive because they have this body that they're really happy with how it looks, and they really don't want to expand, they don't want to get fat, right? But what they're doing is growing a baby. And to grow a baby, you need about 25 pounds to 45 pounds, depending on the size of the baby and the particular birth giver and what her needs are going to be. So weight goes on in multiple ways. It can go on by bad food, and it can go on by good food. And that's where we've focused many times about good quality food, using money and resources and choices for foods that come from what Mother Nature makes in as much as possible, right? The fruits, the vegetables, good proteins, and whole grains. All right, let's continue. So, prematurity and low birth weight can also come from inductions, right? Because sometimes there may be an issue going on, such as Jessica's. The mom, her cervix was not able to hold her in the womb long enough for her to grow bigger. Therefore, she needed to be born early. And we're going to talk about the NICU in a little while and come back to Jessica's story about that. So, an ineffective placenta. Yes, a placenta is another reason why babies are small or that they may come early, and why the NICU becomes part of their story. So when a placenta may not grow as well as it needs to, and obviously when we have a baby that is conceived, the baby gets in there, and in the very beginning, before any of it has anything to do with the mom feeding the baby starts subdividing and eventually burrows into the uterus and begins that process of making a placenta. So during that time, the baby goes through a transition from having its yolk sac to take care of it to the mother's blood system feeding it, and that way it begins to feed the baby, and then it is the mother's responsibility with how her body does to be able to feed the baby. If the placenta did not get seeded well, did not grow well in the beginning, it might have a harder time later on catching up. No matter how much a mother eats well or doesn't eat well, it may have a harder time. We know that good nutrition can make a difference. Even with a placenta that may not have gotten itself well done and nice and healthy and big, we know that good nutrition, so that the quantity of blood that can go into the placenta that can transport nutrients, oxygen, and etc. to the baby, are vitally important to helping that baby grow to its maximum, right? Okay, so let's go back to inductions for a moment. Inductions are sometimes done because a baby is small for days. Sometimes it's from what's called an intrauterine growth retardation. Retardation is a terrible thing. Let's go for restricted, okay? Restrictions. And uh-oh, got it down the wrong pipe. Sorry, team. It's about 102 here today, and I've got a fan down below. I think I got dry. So inductions for a baby who is not thriving as well may be the right choice for that baby. I don't know. That's individual circumstances. But we do know that in a midwifery care perspective, if we notice that a baby is a little slow to grow, our method is put the mother on bed rest or modified bed rest. She might be couch potato versus bed, and feed her. Feed her, feed her, give her lots to drink, cut down her activity level, and see if that solves it. If the baby starts to grow well, then we know that the mother, the birth giver, has a lot to contribute to that baby doing well. Of course, the babies get monitored and etc. when those things happen to make sure that they are okay to continue growing inside. But that is one of the solutions, because sometimes some of the other reasons that this happens might be not just low calorie, poor quality of food, a placenta that might be not as sufficient, but it may also be that a birth giver is doing too much. Perhaps it's that she or they are working out. Big workout. They want to run 10 miles every day and work out at the gym for 2 or 3 hours. And obviously they may not have other kids when they do that. Maybe they do. But to work out and work out and work out and use all the calories in order to be able to feed and grow a baby, there has to be a balance in that, right? So we want a good balance of good exercise and activity level. We want a healthy placenta, and we want a mom who's eating good quality food. So when we get all of those together, they do a good job. But sometimes if something's out of balance, too much activity, or maybe it's too much stress, and stress can come from it too, because maybe that birth giver has a very stressful job and works 10-hour days and doesn't get home, which means that person, grabs something to eat and throws it in their mouth and is trying to catch up with everything that they can. And doing that and growing a baby sometimes aren't a good mix. So what happens? The baby starts not thriving as well, isn't growing as well, because there's too much expected of the person who's growing the baby. Thank you for those thumbs up. And so we have to slow that down. Sometimes it's modifying the work, sometimes it's coming off of work, sometimes it may be that this is a birth giver who's had a number of children, and the stress of taking care of everybody and keeping up with everything is also doing that to the child that's growing. So what do? We get help. Others come in, they help with meals, they help with laundry, and we put the birth giver to bed, right? Or on the couch. Thank you. And our best hope is that within 3 to 7 days, we see an improvement. We see babies starting to thrive a little more. And one of the things that happens when a baby is not thriving is their activity level is much less. And so we see the activity level start to grow and progress when the calories are going in and the baby is now getting fed. Because any of us on the outside world, if we don't eat, what happens? You get grumpy, you get tired, and you don't want to get up and do anything, right? So babies in utero, same way. They are tired. They don't have enough energy, so they sleep. Now, sleeping is meant to help them grow, especially in those early weeks. They have to do a lot of sleeping because that's where they grow, and they grow through childhood that way too. So we want to make sure that we have a good balance in things. Thank you for those lovely hearts. Yes, asking for help is necessary. Yes, it is, because when you have a birth giver, a mother who has other children, she says, I don't have time to sit down. I don't have time to eat. I'm always taking care of running children here, running children there. I have a toddler. What am I supposed to do? How do I handle my toddler? You have to draw on the village and get the help, because who is the best incubator for the baby? Anybody want to answer that one? Who's the best incubator for a baby? Yeah, the mother, the birth giver, is the best incubator, because that womb was made exactly to handle that baby. And the placenta was made to help the baby, and the cord, and everything that's going on, the excess blood volume, which is why when we talked about inductions and high blood pressure and pre-toxemia, that can cause an early baby to be born, because the baby and the body say, It's safer for the baby to get out than to stay in because there's too much stress on the body to have the baby in here anymore. And babies come early and then they are little. And when that happens, they end up in the NICU, right? So we know how important a good balance to that life is. And we've taken care of families that have had 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 babies. And one of the most important things that we find is they have to eat. And you'd think with a lot of kids, you'd be eating all the time because the kids are always eating. But often you're taking care of them. And now you must take care of yourself, which is a good habit to get into because your body is taking care of another baby. And a baby needs to eat every couple hours. Those of you who have had children know that when those babies come out, they eat, right? They're eating. They're little eating machines. And if they go 4 or 5 hours in multiple stretches, they are not eating, they are not growing, and they are sleepy and lethargic. The baby inside does the same thing. So food matters. Gaining weight matters. Now, some birth givers might already start out nice and robust. For them, it may be a different story about weight gain versus what their quality of food is. Okay? All right, so genetics we talked about. Might be a small frame, might be somebody that in their family they have a lot of babies that come early. It might be that perhaps that's what their family does. Sometimes they start out with a baby 5.5 pounds, and each baby gets successively bigger because the body can now accommodate it. There's no data, no research on that one necessarily, but it's something that we have seen, okay? And that doesn't mean that if you start with a 10-pounder that you're going to get 11 and 12 and 13. We talked about that last week. Some of that is diet controlled, some of it is genetics, and it is helpful to keep it under control if the first baby is 10 pounds. All right, another reason is that a baby may decide to be smaller is where the placenta is attached. We have seen, and there's much research on this one, you can go look up, that placentas that are attached on the lower segment of the uterus don't get as much blood flow. So sometimes those babies can be a little smaller. And there's nothing really you can do about it to change the placenta except make sure that the baby's growing and that you eat plenty and keep the baby getting as much nutrition as possible so that they grow well. Does that mean that every placenta that's low-lying, this is an issue? No, but it's one possibility for some babies. Now, another is multiples. If one placenta is attached at the bottom and one placenta is attached at the top, it may be that the top placenta attached to that baby may be that that baby will grow bigger than the one that's attached at the bottom. So you have babies of discrepancy size, which is okay to some degree, but there's a limit to that, right? So multiples, that's another reason. So in understanding the prevention of it, we've talked about nutrition, decreasing your stress levels, and I know some of you say, I can't do that. And I say, what's the choice? What's your option? It's either decrease the stress levels, ask for help, get people in to work with you and get meals in, help with toddler care. We've said sometimes lay down 10 minutes out of every hour and read a book to a toddler and have something to eat and drink every time you do. That alone can sometimes help significantly, okay? So a lot of it has to do with that. The other is having more individualized care. And we know that we've talked about the difference between allopathic or your doctor, OB, general direction, and midwifery care, and that we see clients from more individual circumstances so we know what their life is like, what their family life is like, maybe what their eating is doing, what their stress levels with partnership or with work or whatever. And part of the job is being able to help them understand how they can make those transitions. And some of them are unrealistic. If you say to somebody, oh, you've got 6 children, I need you to be on the couch all day long and I need you to eat. And they're like, who's going to fix the meals? Who's going to take care of the kids? Who's going to do this? That's where it comes to helping them find what those resources are and following up with them and checking in with them and making sure that things are going okay. Because that allows the baby, hopefully, to stay in as long as possible, even if they had to be born at a hospital or if they could be born at home after 37 weeks. So we know that work can be an issue, because if a birth giver is also part of a working mom who depends on that income, disability can be signed by the physicians. Sometimes it's still not enough, and that can be a stress. And that has to be worked through with family and various things of that nature. But the importance is giving that individual guidance about rest, nutrition, how to handle life, and how to prevent having to be sitting in a NICU and forced, right, to have to sit there because your baby came too early, because you didn't want to sit at home. And that is so important to be able to understand that perspective sometimes when one says, I just don't have time to do this. And it's like, well, the baby needs you to take time. Otherwise, the baby may come early. Now, preterm labor. Sometimes preterm labor comes because a mother is too busy, hasn't been eating enough, and the baby says, you have to slow down, and I need you to eat, and I need you to take care of me, and I need you to pay attention in order for me to be able to stay in here until I'm easier to take care of. Because right now, if I go and I'm born either vaginally or by cesarean, depending on the weeks that the baby is, you're going to be coming and seeing me in the NICU, because that's where I'm going to grow. And if there's a way to prevent it, take the prevention. It's so much easier to do. Another reason some babies are born early is water breaks. And some babies are just keen to not stay in the womb as long as they need to in order to go home after they're born. Now, let's go back. Excuse me, I'm going to take another drink. Let's go back to Jessica's. Jessica was born 3 months early. And a baby who's born 3 months early, which is around 28 weeks, this is a baby that is what we call a fragile baby. They really cannot be held easily. They can be held gently, but they usually need to be on ventilators for a little while anyway. Because we use more medications getting ready for a birth like that, they can be given steroids and various things like that that help their lungs to mature faster, that hopefully they can stay off. When I was a nurse, many, many moons ago, back in the 80s, 70s and 80s, 90s, when we had a premature baby, they were put on ventilators for many weeks and on oxygen for many weeks. And these babies had a difficult time learning to adjust to life. Nowadays, they do better because we do have more technology in the hospital. And that's the right place for them to be born, right? Yeah. And the NICU is a good place for them to be hanging out, getting themselves adjusted, and being able to be supported with whatever technology they may need to be supported with until they can get big enough for their moms to feed them, either by bottle or by breast or both, and be able to maintain their temps, be able to grow well so that they can go home. And a 28-week baby, often the birth giver has to give birth by cesarean. And the reason that that happens is that the baby is too fragile to be able to handle going through birth. So we have a good technology that does this for the right reasons. It's my night for stuff in my throat. So the reason that this happened was because her mother had what's called an incompetent cervix. And this cervix means that it wouldn't stay closed well enough, and it was unable to hold the baby inside, which meant birth came earlier and labor came, and there really was no choice. And so in those circumstances, there are preventative things that can be done in subsequent pregnancies, but sometimes in a first pregnancy, you don't know about it until it occurs and happens. And what they do is they actually stitch the cervix closed, and they put moms more on bed rest, in order to keep the baby from getting down in there as the baby gets bigger. And then eventually they pull it out, and hopefully the mother, the birth giver, is far enough along that she can vaginally give birth and that her baby will go home with her, or hopefully not spend very much time in the NICU. It can be so draining on parents, not to mention the stress on the baby to be in the NICU. The NICU, in case some of you don't know what that is, that's the Neonatal Intensive Care Unit, and it is where babies go who are premature because they need monitoring and they need feeding help and they need to be watched closely and things need to be maintained. Now, sometimes there's a small baby who might be term, and a term baby who's 5 pounds 5 ounces, they might end up putting in the NICU if the baby is not making a good transition. And frankly, that's any baby who is not making a good transition to life. The smaller these babies are, these little babies, the more stress it is coming out, and sometimes the babies don't adjust as well or as quickly as maybe they want them to. And then their cords are cut, of course, which is really a helpful tool for them, is to keep those cords intact and let the mother's body help the baby longer to transition if they can. And the other thing is what we call kangaroo care. And there's probably other names for it. That's the one I'm most familiar with. I wish more of our hospitals in the United States had kangaroo care, because it would, in my opinion, drastically improve milk supply, how a mother is able to care for her baby, and how the baby grows. And what kangaroo care is basically the baby gets put in your pouch. It's just that. In fact, they've made special t-shirts to be able to put the babies in. But just putting babies skin to skin neurologically helps a baby by listening to your heart, skin to skin. The baby is kept warm, you feel good, that love comes through, the baby feels much less stress and is able to just rest and sleep. Even babies on ventilators are put on mom's chests when they're very tiny babies that have been born, because they are learning that this is a really important aspect. So understanding this is knowing that as a birth giver, and please pass this information along. As a birth giver, if a baby comes early or needs to go into the NICU, sometimes they need some stabilization time in order to just get stable. But as quickly as possible, even gently talking to your baby, if they won't let you touch your baby, if it's so tiny, singing, hearing your voice, taping your heartbeat and listening to your heartbeat. These are the familiar sounds to a baby who is little and young and in an environment that is not conducive, right? Necessary, but not conducive to a baby having a lower stress zone. If any of you have ever been in the NICU, you may have seen that they actually put blankets over their head, their cribs. I did not rest and reduce stress with all 3 of my kids. Wish I would have known this information before. I had lung damage, yes, and lung infection sometimes caused by the NICU equipment or the incubator being left open accidentally. Yes, so when a parent is there, you are your baby's best advocate. Knowing that when your baby is born, sometimes it can feel overwhelming to have a baby in the NICU with monitors on and sometimes tubes in their nose or feeding tubes, or all these various things can feel like you can't even get near them. And sometimes they don't want you to touch them. And I understand why with the very premature, such as Jessica was. These are micro preemies when they're small like that. But to be able to sing or softly whisper or talk to them, let them hear joyful sounds. These are things that help you as a parent say, I'm here for you. You are okay. And we have heard it all too often where parents with very premature babies have been told, once they sort of get past that first few days and they're ready to go home, that they should just go home. They don't need to be here every day, all day. Go home, take care of your other kids. The babies are just here to grow. And I think, no, they are in an external womb, and you need to spend time with your children to be able to be advocates for them, such as Jessica's. Being able to make sure that things are not left open, that they don't get infections from other things, that you ask questions. And this is regardless of whether your baby is a preemie, a small baby, a full term, a baby who's large and goes into the NICU. Do not be intimidated by the fact that there are monitors, bells and whistles, nurses and doctors. Be able to, when things are stable, to ask questions. What were the lab results? Can you explain these to me? I want to keep track of them. I have a notebook, or I have my trusty dusty phone. Keep track of lab works like bilirubins. Many babies end up in the NICU on because their bilirubin went up high. They got jaundice. Find out. It is your right to know what those lab results are and what the goals are for being able to hold your baby or feed your baby or nurse your baby or take your baby home. You are the baby's parent, regardless of the fact that the baby has a band on that says the baby belongs to the hospital. They don't belong to the hospital, but you are grateful to the hospital that they have the technology to help support the baby. And that's what they're doing, supporting the baby. But it is okay as a parent to ask questions and expect answers. Do never, never, never have somebody say, well, we're just trying to figure out whether the baby has this. Why do you think the baby has this? Because of this and this. Okay, so what tests are you planning to run, and what are you expecting from those tests? And it's okay to ask questions and keep notes, because doctors change in hospitals because some go on call. They are not there often on the weekends, or if they are, there's somebody new. Nurses change. If you're in the hospital for a long time, babies generally have a few nurses that sort of rotate through the same family. That's helpful for you, but you have new nurses that say, I don't know this baby, I'm just taking care of this baby, and I'm going by what the notes are. Guess who knows the baby best? You do. And watching over that baby is very helpful for you to do that, okay? Let's see what else Jessica said. My parents lived an hour away, but came to visit me each day after work. So important. And I have no doubt that when she was in that little incubator, she looked forward because she knew their voices. She knew their touch, their love, and etc. And they needed to be able to be there to let her know she was safe and well. Another one of ours says, hi Kaleem, I've had so many friends experience NICU life. It can be life-saving, and some have had such supportive experiences. Absolutely. Others leave with trauma they don't even understand until years later. I wish this empowering message was always shared for all mothers and fathers. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for that. I really appreciate knowing that what I'm saying tonight is there. And I put it out on, Facebook, YouTube, and on Instagram. Instagram doesn't hold it, so they do have to go to Facebook to get it. But it is my hope that more and more parents will be taking ownership, right? That is my motto. Take ownership and be empowered for what is yours to do. And these wonderful NICUs are so helpful. We've had babies who had problems, not from birth, but had internal things that needed to be addressed. And taking them in and going in our area, we have a pediatric ER in our downtown area. And when I go in, I know I'm seeing pediatricians. They are so supportive to the families. And if the baby has to go up to the NICU, they know that we're going to try our hardest to keep the families together. And when you have long-term NICU time, it does become something where you have to go home and sleep, or you won't make milk, and you are very tired, so you do have to leave your baby, and that is hard. I know one baby that we had in, I went and I sat, I would finish a birth, and I said, you know, I have some time. Can I come in and I'll go and just hold your baby while you go to sleep? And she went home, she went to sleep, and I stayed for 4.5 hours and just held her baby. So there are ways now in the NICU where you can sign in, I think 1 or 2, either family or friend members, who can come in and just hold your baby while you go home and sleep and shower, which is so important for you, or work sometimes. We even have volunteers in some hospitals that are coming in, and that's their only job. Just hold the babies, because babies are meant to be held and loved and cuddled and just snuggled up by someone if it can't be a parent that can be there with them. So the NICU is an amazing thing. We do want to keep babies out of the NICU if there's a way to prevent them ever getting there. And I think that's part of my message. One, we know how supportive and how good that can be. Jessica's a perfect example of that, because babies back many years ago would not have possibly ever survived if they had been that early. They just wouldn't. They were so fragile. So we have the option to be able to help babies to grow up into wonderful adults, which Jessica has 3 beautiful children that I've gotten to work with that I absolutely adore, and be able to understand that when the babies get older, and meaning that the babies get closer to term and they're getting to they are term, sometimes over term, we want to keep them out of the NICU. And part of the way to do that is have a healthy pregnancy and have as least interventive of a birth as possible. Meaning if you're going to be in a hospital, have monitors to listen to the baby, and basically that's it. Have as little as possible. The less you have, the less risk that your baby will need a reason to have to go to the NICU. The more you put interventions into a birth unnecessarily, and I truly mean unnecessarily, okay? If you add epidurals in, it does drop your blood pressure, it puts the baby at risk. If the baby has a cord, if you're not, now cords are not an issue unless there's more technology going on with it, except in very rare circumstances, all right? They can do very, very well if you don't intervene on them, but you listen and make sure they're doing well. They can do extremely well in a normal natural birth, but if you break water at 2 or 4 centimeters, they may not have time to handle that if there's a cord. And those babies could be distressed and end up in the NICU, okay? The less is best. Keep birth simple, powerful, ownership, and empowerment. The more we do that, regardless of the place that you choose to birth and who your care provider is, the better birth will happen, the less we will have babies in the NICU, and the better the outcome will be overall for their health, their well-being, for your bonding, for your breastfeeding, and for parenting. All right, anything that anyone else would like to add for tonight? Let's see if I accomplished all of my lovely lists. Yes, 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 yes. Yes, I did. I accomplished all of my lists. Thank you for the hearts. I absolutely adore those. I love seeing your names, and I really love the interactions. So please just keep with those. Those really fire me on, and they give me ideas for more things that I can talk about. If you have anything, whether you've had friends, thank you. You have friends, you have family, there's a topic that you would like me to talk about, please shoot me off a message, okay? You can do it to my regular one, Kaleem Joy, or you can do it to Natural Childbirth 101, and I'm happy to do a topic of request, because those are the ones that I'm reaching out. What can I impart? How can I better this? How can I give more insight to give all of you the courage to speak up to family and friends and give them either, please watch this, or give them some tidbits of information that maybe their care providers have never shared with them. And maybe it's not their first baby. It could be their 7th baby and they still have not been told that they can have all of the choices and be the one that has ownership. I'm so grateful for all of you. I just cannot say enough how fun it's been to be able to be with all of you. Oh, I've got a ton of you coming in and I'm just about done. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. Please go back and watch this and really gain some insight about little babies, about why they happen, can they be prevented, and in many things they can, but not always. Okay, let's see. Can't wait to watch it from the beginning. Thank you so much, Heidi. All right, here comes my closing line, right? Remember to go in and hug your kids. Tell them you love them. Is your Big Babies live, saved on Facebook? Yes, it is. My Big Babies is live and saved on Facebook. Tell them you love them. Tell them they can do anything they set their mind to. Because I believe that we can create a new generation of people if we know and understand so much more. Education is abundant for us in all ways, but I'm giving you some that hopefully will give you the courage to really take that ownership and make it yours. All right, have an awesome week, everybody. I'll see you next Wednesday night, 7 o'clock. See you there. Thank you.